The world is uniting against America. That's the theme of our latest Trumpet print edition. The cover shows the nations of the world, or the leaders of the world, conspiring behind America's back, including a very angry-looking Mohammed bin Salman. The issue also reports on the growing threat of nuclear war, on the rise of video games, and asks if a Christian can believe in evolution. We'll talk about all this and more on today's Trumpet World. The United States is going to be left out in the cold as two gigantic trade blocs, Europe and Latin America, mesh together and begin calling the shots in world commerce. The United States is going to be literally besieged, economically frozen out of world trade. The cover article of our latest print magazine begins with that dramatic quote from the May 1962 Plain Truth. And that quote is quickly becoming reality, with nations around the world forming trade deals and getting ready to face off with the United States. Here to talk about this latest Trumpet print with me is Assistant Managing Editor Philip Nice. Philip, thank you for joining us. And what stood out to you from this Uniting Against America issue?
Well, it's good to be with you, and thanks for having me on. I will remember from the meetings when we were discussing the cover and the cover story and what we would cover in this issue, just how easy it is to look past a trade deal or as not being a dramatic piece of news in the same way that a war would be or whatever. But with this being signed on January 17th, close to a date that we monitor closely, and just understanding the how much of a nation's underlying power comes from these trade deals, it is cover worthy for sure. So this deal connects the European Union to Latin America, and we tried to convey this drama, the scale, the power that's involved with these trade deals, because this isn't just one new company coming into existence, or one new Apple computer, or McDonnell Douglas, or Raytheon, or something like that. This is that times thousands over time, and not very much time, when nations can work together to get raw resources out of the ground, get them to where they need to be refined, get them from there to where they can be finished, and get them from there to where they can be consumed or deployed. The more nations are involved in that, the fewer restrictions, tariffs, and otherwise there are involved in that, the more wealthy a nation becomes, yes, but the more powerful a nation becomes. In the meetings, we were talking about how geography is such a major factor in a nation's power. Built on that geography is the types of power centers that are involved in making a nation be able to build things, be able to move things, be able to develop new technologies, to be able to manufacture large amounts of whatever it is that they need. And so the United States has been very comfortable and very powerful with its military because of the manufacturing that underlies it, because of the wealth that underlies it, because of the types of free trade, whether it's within the United States, in our case, as a larger country, or with trade with outside countries, which every nation relies on. National power comes from these types of trade deals, and how they affect a nation's economy. So that, and then again, as I say, the fact that it was signed after decades of negotiation, uh, these these trade deals, they call them free trade deals, are not simple matters. They take decades, and they involve tons of rules and exceptions, and those are all designed to for a nation to try to get an advantage with its agriculture or its mining or whatever it might be. So lots of back and forth. I mean, this was 25 years ago. So 2001 is when they were starting to get serious about trying to connect Europe and Latin America and their economies. And that has almost still hasn't actually been implemented yet, but it's almost happened now. And like you said, with that quote that is from 1962, this is something we've been watching out for a long time.
I think this is a good place to start. Like, as a general interest news magazine, say, not something that's aimed at economists or a niche audience, we're putting trade deals as our cover article. And a lot of people wouldn't put that importance on trade deal. They'd relegate it to the business pages of the newspaper, not the front pages of the newspaper. And one of the core lessons from this is trade deals affect your world. Like you were saying, we talked about this, I think, last time. This is the stuff that power really is built of. Like, the nations that control world trade are the world dominating empires. That pre-Columbus, the big kind of cross the world trade went through the Middle East. And where were the dominant world empires before Columbus? Generally, they were in the Middle East. Then after Columbus, and you have European powers going on big ships, who are the world dominating empires? It's like little Portugal, and then Spain, and then the Netherlands, another relatively small country, and France and England, and then ultimately the United States. And you have faces off against countries that don't dominate world trade. You have the Nazis that try to conquer the Soviet Union and kind of establish more of an overland world trade. They fail, they lose. A face-off between the US and the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union has a lot going for it. This was a massive country, massive amounts of resources, large population, very much on a lot of metrics, a peer competitor to the United States. But America dominated the oceans and dominated trade, and the Soviets didn't. And without, in the long run there, the funds and the incoming money and resources that you get from trade and technology and things like that, the Soviets just couldn't compete and they collapsed. So this isn't just an academic business. Okay, well, if I'm thinking of investing in Latin American companies, then maybe I should pay attention to this. That's one of the core contentions of this article. And the cover article from Trumpet editor-in-chief, Germany unites the world against America. Like, this is about the survival of nations, not about the safety of your investments.
Exactly. I like how you mentioned there in those historical examples, several conflicts, several military conflicts. Look at the history of military conflicts going back maybe to the beginning. And what is the point? What is the goal? Why does a nation escalate into from diplomatic arguments into actual warfare? And then when the war is actually happening, where are the armies going and why are they going there? When you're a kid, you just think that they're, these guys line up against these guys and try to kill all the other guys. But military history is about capturing objectives. It's about capturing ports and cities and economic centers. Very often, there are examples of wars fought for other reasons, but many wars, and the reason why that battle was fought there is because that was a railroad hub, or the reason that was fought there was because controlling that controlled the river, and therefore you controlled everything that's coming downstream to that spot. And that's why speaking of rivers, and you spoke of controlling the oceans, that's why if you get control of a certain place in a river or a certain passageway in the ocean, that you can control much more than just that little spot, because you are controlling the traffic that needs to go through there. So this article also, it has this subhead "Besieged in Your Gates," and it's just a powerful reminder, another reminder. We cover this in every issue, of the importance of these gates, the fact that God specifically talked about these gates in the Bible, and that these gates equate to global, national gates. When you hear gates, you think of maybe the actual swinging doors of the cities in ancient times. The walled cities. The gate obviously is crucial to your survival if you're in the walled city of Jerusalem or wherever it might be, which is effectively a large fortress. Those exist on a global scale in straits, ports, canals, these mountain passes as well, overland. You mentioned an overland trading empire. Those can exist as well. But controlling the gate of his enemies, God specifically gave that promise to the descendants of Abraham in the context of these promises to Abraham that are national. Your descendants are not going to be just a family or a tribe or a clan. They're going to be nation, and not even just a nation, but multiple nations. And that's in the United States and Britain and prophecy, which becomes more relevant by the day. But this article really gets into the importance of those gates. And I just think that the more you look into this, the more you realize, like you said, that power and your day-to-day life, what you're used to, what you're comfortable with, what you expect, what's always there for you and you always expect to be there for you, is a function of control of these gates, the traffic that flows through them, and the nations that trade with one another to develop the energy, the manufacturing, all these types of major things that make your day-to-day life what it is. And so, yes, there's a contest going on over those resources, that traffic, that flow, because the movement of the things is also important, not just we have coal. Well, can you get it into a usable form, and can you get it to where it needs to go? All those things are crucial to national power and to your day-to-day life. And there are specific things prophesied in the Bible about what will happen to those possessions and to that power in what the Bible calls the time of the end, or the latter days.
And it's that prophecy and the fact that all of this is forecast in advance that really makes this pop. I mean, this article begins with a quote from the Plain Truth, but then it also has a quote from T.H. Tetons in a book that he wrote in 1953, where he talks about, hey, and the Nazi leftovers that haven't been punished after World War II, they're looking at rebuilding Europe with the help of Latin America and by establishing close business ties with Latin America. And they're going to work on building that connection with Latin America and use that to seize control of trade and shut America out of world trade. And then it goes on and brings out where the Plain Truth was saying the same thing, where Herbert W. Armstrong was saying the same thing. In this case, not based on an observation of what former Nazis are doing, but based on observations of Bible prophecy and prophecies that relate very directly for trade. One of the ones mentioned, first of all, is Isaiah 23 and verse 3 that talks about a marketplace for nations in the New King James Version, about a trading alliance that cuts off the United States. So we've been talking about for years, watch for this to happen. And now we're reaching this situation where President Trump is, and the way that the world has reacted to him has led to this global effort to form trading links without the United States. And Europe they've been trying to do this Latin American deal with Mercosur since the early 90s. And they finally now, it's been tremendously controversial. It's taken a lot of effort, particularly from Germany, to push to get this over the line. even then, they've got, I think, the most important part of it over the line, but not even all of the everything that goes into the trade deal over the line. But everything that is happening exactly the way that Herbert W. Armstrong talked about decades ago and that we've been talking about for years. And it's the fact that this is a fulfillment of all of those prophecies, or when it becomes people like Teton's predictions. And you have to ask yourself then, well, is there something behind what T.H. Teton's was saying? Are we looking at a Europe where Nazis that were defeated went underground, infiltrated the government? They're now working to rise up Europe as an alternative superpower to the United States. And then even more fundamentally, well, is there something behind Bible prophecy and the fact that it is proven accurate? And then, as this article does, well, then you have to go on and look at, well, what does Bible prophecy describe as coming next? And well, it talks about just one prophecy. Well, it talks about several, but just one example from this article talking about Deuteronomy 28 from verse 53 that describes a siege. Mr. Flurry writes that it describes just how catastrophic this besiegement will be for America. Isolation from the rest of the world will break down supply lines and create major disruptions and dangerous scarcities. Coupled with God cursing America's farmlands, this will cause catastrophic famine. Given the state of our society, we will tear each other apart over what is left. It will inflame riots, social disintegration, and animalistic behavior that is hard to imagine. We need to wake up and face the horrors of these prophecies. And that's a big warning. We need to wake up and face the horrors of what is warned here, but also the hope and the reality of the fact that the Bible forecast all of this in advance.
Absolutely. That's what you can take from this article and from this issue, is that you read the Bible and you see people were descended from Abraham. God chose them, worked with them in a special way, didn't give them special favors. It turns out to be pretty hard to be chosen by God to be God's special people. They obeyed or they didn't. Most often they did not, and they faced geopolitical consequences. They faced real world sieges and wars and captivity and suffering. And then that seems in a way very different from our time today, in the way that a city gate seems different, than our sophisticated, modern, populated world today. But it's the same thing. The Bible does apply today. The Bible does prophesy that the descendants of Abraham, like Israel, still exists. The nations of Israel still exist, not just the Jewish nation, but the nations of Israel do exist. That confirms Bible prophecy. God gave us those gates in the first place upon which so much national wealth and power is predicated, and he is very justly taking them away and taking away that trade power, and allowing other nations to be empowered in the same way that we were. And so it gets back to the Bible being true, prophecy being true, and our actions, our relationship with God or lack thereof, affecting the world around us. And so we're watching, and God doesn't just give that premise, blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. It does get back to that, but the Bible is way more detailed and way more informative and way more specific about how these nations of Israel, what they'll be like, who they'll be, where they'll be found, who their enemies will be, what their enemies will try to do. And that's what we get into in this, the sidebar there, how Germany could lead the siege. And then your article on one way the world can hit back. The Bible's specific enough that we have specific things we know to look for.
And even on that point about how specific it is, Mr. Flurry at the end of this article draws attention to the fact that this happened, like you mentioned, on January 17th, and that Herbert W. Armstrong talked about exactly this for decades. He says the fact that it happened on this day underscores its importance. He said, Mr. Armstrong, who prophesied about this coming siege of America, died 40 years ago on January 16th. Ever since, we've seen important events occur on January 16th and 17th, both significant dates. And he references his book, January 16th, God's Miracle Day. And indeed, the whole article, he kind of concludes pointing back to, he was right, this newly updated book, going through, this is one example, but the very many prophecies that Herbert W. Armstrong wrote about that have been proven true. And this date, this event points back to the work God did through that man as well. And so, digging into that book, he was right. So much of that is we have to update it every 4 or 5 years because there's dozens more things that have proven true or ways that have come to pass in more details that we have to update it on. So it points to where God is getting this message out from as well.
Right, and the specificity of the prophecies that the Assyrian would be more important to watch and pray regarding. I mean, Jesus Christ himself prophesied and told us to watch and pray. But the fact that the Bible would identify specific nations, and obviously it doesn't say, the Federal Republic of Germany or whatever the proper name of Germany is today, but it talks about the Assyrian. And if you have good Bible study, but also revelation from God, from the where God is working, as you said, then you can identify these modern identities of these ancient nations, just like you can identify that the United States did descend from Abraham, from the tribes of Israel, as did Israel, as did England, Britain. So there are specific things to watch out for, and that's why we lock in on this trade deal, or zero in on this trade deal. Why your article talks about one way to hit back. Why Europe and a German-led Europe is something that we'll watch out for. There could be a major headline about something else that we at the Trumpet will just ignore. Like you said, we'll put different things on the cover than you might expect a General News Magazine or World News Magazine to do, because we're looking for things that fulfill step by step, bit by bit, these prophecies in the Bible.
So Mr. Flurry had that first article, Germany Unites the World Against America, one way the world can hit back. We had a whole Trumpet World episode on exactly that, on just the way that nations around the world are already talking about weaponizing America's massive debt and America's overwhelming reliance on debt, again, in a way that comes right out of all of this Bible, all of these different prophecies. And really, you can see a fight going on. There are things that the Trump administration is doing to fight back, all about debt and attacking the dollar. And there is a unique... all nations are indebted. This is what stood out to me working on this article. Everyone, America has a massive debt, but so does France, and so does Britain, and Italy, and Germany less so. Japan, huge. One way America stands out, though, is they have to continually roll over their debt. Every year, they have much more debt becoming due. And so we usually think, okay, what's the growth? How much bigger is America's debt at the end of this year than it was at the start of this year? Whereas actually, because of America is having to pay back huge amounts of debt, the amount of new borrowing is far, far, far bigger than that. It's off the charts, and America is really unique in this. Britain is not like that. France is not like that. Even Japan is not like that. Their debt is much more long-term. It's not due for decades. Whereas America is dealing much more in this short-term debt and constantly having to borrow more and more money to keep themselves going. So that's a unique weapon that can be and is being used against America. So we've got the trade deals, but then also the weaponized debt. As something that nations are actively talking about and trying to put in place the infrastructure they can use to attack America on that front.
Right, and this is something that's blessing turned into a curse in the same way that the possession of the sea gates or the trade deals is a blessing turned into a curse. You also covered the connection to the dollar and the value of the dollar. America is also unique in the fact that we have the currency that the world for a lifetime has wanted the most. there's the most demand for the dollar in international trade. So we've covered that before, but that's in the article, and it's just to I mentioned it just to say that that's another way in which the U.S. is unique, and for a long time that's been a way for us to possess more wealth and power than we otherwise would. That also is changing, and these things are interconnected. But there's these different fronts in which basically war is being waged already over trade, over demand for the dollar, over possession of uh, of trade favors and trade portals, gates. Um, we're always at war. We're always at war, and it's just a matter of whether it breaks out into actual, killing. But nations are always struggling against one another, and the United States is beginning to lose those types of wars, those battles, I should say. And as you said, other nations are now saying it out loud, and that's a major step for another nation to say out loud, if America keeps doing this thing we don't like over here, we should sell our dollars, or um, we should uh, get rid of our debt, or we should stop buying American debt, which, like you said, it has to be a constant flow. There has to be constant purchases from outside of America of American debt. So to say that out loud is a significant step, and that's something that at least I haven't really heard said that way on that stage in the same way that we've heard it just since the beginning of this year.
So you mentioned Bible prophecy, and we're giving this prophetic warning about what is happening in the world. Meanwhile, you're getting a very different picture from the Trump administration. So while this is going on, while you have the world against America, you have President Trump's Board of Peace. And he's putting out this message of, well, I'm bringing peace to the world. From America's perspective, the international scene is better than ever. And we've got this fantastic new Board of Peace that is going to really bring peace, stability around the world, safety for the United States. And it's the exact opposite of the message that you're getting in the rest of this issue. And so also as part of this kind of section on the world against America, we have an article by Trumpet executive editor Stephen Flurry titled "The Board of Trump" that asks and answers the question, well, can this board bring world peace?
President Trump Donald Trump has had an extraordinary record of success from his early days, and you think about real estate, investments in businesses, television, and he just seems to take on anything and throw out a bold, this is what we're going to do now, and everybody else has to react to that, and he makes some progress. I mean, we're going to take Greenland. We just talked about is a good example of these bold statements, these bold goals that he throws out there. And I mean, any leader tends to talk positively about his organization and his own abilities, and they don't say, we're trying this, but it probably won't work. But this is, as this article shows, this is taking it way beyond that, and it's dangerous. It's deadly, in fact, to basically say that my boundless ability will bring world peace. You're running directly into statements in the Bible that and statements specifically about this region in the Bible and in Bible prophecy that warn that it's not going to work, especially as you claim that peace in the Middle East is now within reach. You claim that you're going to do it through this assemblage of leaders and doing deals and making everybody happy and wealthy, and you know, again, doing deals. And you're talking about the Middle East. You're talking about the area around Israel and Jerusalem. You're talking about an area that's been war torn for millennia. And you're in saying that, this is the important thing to understand that this article brings out, in saying that you are disagreeing with God. You are saying it's possible. You are saying you're going to do what God says in the Bible only he can do. And you're saying you're going to do it without God, without looking into what he says is necessary, without repentance, as we so often emphasize from the Bible and in the Trumpet. And this article just goes through the details of this, the ceasefire plan, the post-Hamas supposedly state of Gaza, and it's just a clear picture, just a perfect picture with stats and names and everything of human beings trying to do what only God can do. President Trump included most of all in this effort. And the executive editor of the Trumpet, Mr. Stephen Flurry, host of the Trumpet Daily as well, has talked a lot about President Trump over the years and talked a lot about things that he's done that no one else would do, could do, the courage that he's had. But the fact that he's done what he's done is because of God's intervention, as the Trumpet has mentioned and said it is even specifically prophesied in the Bible as well. And so President Trump is crossing a dangerous line by taking this, if you want to call it bombastic, self-assured approach, power of positive thinking, Trump style positivity to world peace and to peace in the Middle East specifically. So this article warns that that's not just misplaced. It's not just wrong. It's not just going to be a failure. It's going to be disastrous.
Yeah, and that article says, Trump is undoubtedly sincere in his belief that his board of peace will create both prosperity and tranquility in the Middle East, but future generations will look back on his promise as a peace for our time moment. And like you say, it gets into, well, the challenges of human nature, and even warnings from people like General Douglas MacArthur, who saw that, it's not about creating a board and getting people to sit down. There's fundamental changes that have to happen in mankind's heart if you're going to bring peace. And also points out just even the more obvious follies of having a board of peace that we say, Canada, you're not invited, but all of these dictators and autocrats, well, great, get on board. We'll make peace with you guys. There's a lot about it that is a flawed approach. The other major article by Mr. Stephen Flurry is on very similar theme. It's called The Unthinkable Will Happen. And this is, like the number one thing on the in tray of the Board of Peace you would think is about how do we solve this problem that we live in a world full of nuclear weapons. And this article quotes from General MacArthur as well, that the doomsday clock has been moved forward once again. And I think there's some faulty reasoning in that. We've had the end of this arms control treaty between the final arms control treaty between America and Russia. And I was talking about that a bit with Joshua last week. Again, I don't see the point in an arms control treaty between two parties if one party routinely breaks. It's not necessarily like then that expiring changes anything if only one party is keeping it, but it's still a very symbolic moment reminding us that we are entering into a time where arms control treaties are not being abided by and nations are rearming and they're building new nuclear weapons. We live in a world where we've grown up with nuclear weapons, where we're kind of okay with them now. But this is a powerful reminder of the stakes that we live in and just the dangerous world and asks, well, could these weapons actually be used?
It's a powerful article. It's an important topic that, like you said, we kind of get used to. Human beings have figured out how to manage being able to kill ourselves en masse completely. And it's kind of this false sense of security. And that MacArthur uh, quote and MacArthur's perspective there at the end of World War II figures in heavily on this article, as you mentioned. It says here, it quotes him saying, military alliances, balances of powers, leagues of nations, you could add boards of peace, all in turn failed, leaving the only path to be by way of the crucible of war. The utter destructiveness of war now blots out this alternative. We have had our last chance. And Mr. Fleury's emphasized this for decades, Mr. Gerald Fleury. There's literally a booklet he wrote decades ago called We Have Had Our Last Chance that just focuses on this clear warning from a man who would know, Douglas MacArthur, General Douglas MacArthur. And his solution, again, gets to the human mind and the human attitude even, which is very, much closer to the Bible than anything you'll hear from the Trump administration. And spoken very sincerely, and spoken after seeing many deaths, many human lives lost because of that nature of the human mind. So we've had our last chance. Is, like I said, it's its own booklet, and Nuclear Armageddon is at the door is the one that's offered here. And I would just really recommend that. And just dwelling on MacArthur, his perspective, he knew very tragically what he was talking about because of what he had experienced. And his conclusion is what the Trumpet's trying to say, what the Bible says far better and far more authoritatively. But he said, it must be of the Spirit if we are to save the flesh. And that article is definitely worth reading and dwelling upon, because this is the world we're living in, and it's getting more nuclear and more belligerent every issue of the Trumpet.
Now, the final section on this world versus America, or the final article in quotes to the world versus America section, is the infographic, How to Besiege the United States, which, there's a lot. A picture can say 1,000 words, and there's a lot here that brings to life what we've been talking about, the tiny percentage of merchant shipping tonnage that comes from the United States, the amount of the world economy the United States has compared to everybody else, the quantity of their warships, which doesn't tell the full picture, but is still an indicative graphic. I don't know how involved you were in making the infographic, but I don't know if you have any points that stood out to you in that production or from that infographic.
Oh, well, I wasn't too heavily involved. Andrew Miller carries the burden of researching these, almost all of these infographics. And I think he did a great job. There's numbers and dollar figures and everything all over the place. Obviously, the United States still is a superpower. You could make a graph of things it does possess and things that it does have advantages in, and so forth. But I think the facts on this infographic do show you cannot be comfortable. You cannot have a sense of security. You cannot feel like this nation is invincible, because it already has these vulnerabilities, and the ones we've already mentioned. It is vulnerable in these ways. And this infographic even adds several ways. Like you said, merchant shipping tonnage is a huge concern. The debt's on there and illustrated on there. The percentage of world GDP and these changes that are happening. Plus, it even throws in, the internal society, the Civil War, that would weaken any nation, any superpower. So as you look at this, you have to admit and you have to acknowledge and you have to ultimately act upon the fact that the United States is not invincible. it is already under economic trade and financial attack. Um, Things could go very bad very quickly, and we can't get comfortable. We can't remain comfortable. We have to realize that there's a lot on the line right now today, where the conflicts are already happening, the trade wars are already happening. Uh, Other nations are already gunning for the United States, and the United States is indeed vulnerable.
Well, that is a big part of the message of all of that half of the article. The world is gathering against America. America is vulnerable. It's easy to be complacent. And well, then what do you need to do about that? And, you know, for anyone acknowledging our vulnerability, that should point us to God and our need for his protection, for his involvement in our lives. And in reality, no nation can stand against the entire world. You know, every nation needs God's help, needs God's protection to thrive. Where we are kind of running out of time that we have in our the overlap in our schedules. There's a few other articles that we could talk about. You know, I have one in there, video games, the hidden dangers, which I gave a whole show about. So we kind of have covered that. A true Christian cannot believe in evolution, another article from Trumpet editor-in-chief Gerald Flurry, where you do get a lot of Christians. It's a bit of a fudge. I think they try to fudge Genesis and get that to and then say, well, we can believe both. And this article directly addresses that. Resisting barbarism. Maybe we'll get Jeremiah on the show to talk about that at some point. But just a fascinating example from America's history of when America stood up to the Barbary pirates. I was slightly disappointed not to see. I think it was Admiral Pellew that came in there, and the British admiral that blew up so much of at least one of the Barbary states. But he didn't make an appearance. It focuses on America's efforts in defeating those, and still makes a very good point. I didn't suggest adding them in. It would have clouded Jeremiah's message there. But anything that you wanted to cover from any of those remaining articles, just quickly, or mention?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, not about an article in particular, but just to really implore your viewers to request the Trumpet, to get your own subscription, to read these, not just online, but get a physical copy. You often mention that when we have these discussions, but the older I get, the more I realize how much you have to decide what not to do, what not to consume in terms of media and so forth, and what's really worth spending time on. This is a magazine that you need to hold in your hands. You need to get that subscription, and to emphasize that it's free. It is free. It's been free the whole time for decades now, and that in itself tells you something unique. Because I think I'm not familiar with many other organizations that are similar, but I don't know. I would bet that there are not very many that offer it completely free, that there's no follow-up. We don't, sell your information, your address. We don't divulge your information or your address or your name. We don't, utilize that. We don't ask you for donations or anything, whatever they call it. We won't ask you for money at all in any form, or dress up the request in something. You'll just get the information. You'll just get, something that connects Donald Trump or Prime Minister of Canada or whatever to the Bible. And then you can look in the Bible and you can start to look at the Bible in a different way. And just having those two physically in front of you is something special. So I'd really encourage you to subscribe to it in print format, not just digitally. Turn off the video games, turn off the computer altogether, and get a print subscription to the Trumpet.
One big reason why we encourage that print subscription is so that it can lead you into the Bible. And that, I think, is the final article I'll just conclude with mentioning. Blow the dust off your Bible. And then the quip, and prepare to be stunned, by Mr. Stephen Flurry. That is just really emphasizing, look into the Bible for yourself. Don't have the courage. And if you've not done it before, that does require some courage and some education and some time to step into something that is unfamiliar. But don't just outsource this to someone else, even to us. Don't just let someone else tell you what the Bible says. Check it out for yourself. See for yourself. And that's what we want this magazine to really be, a guide pointing you to the Bible and helping you get in and dig in for yourself. And that mentions a number of different places to go. It concludes by talking to Mystery of the Ages, a great place to begin studying the Bible. The Herbert W. Armstrong Bible Correspondence Course, that is less of an article and more just that, well, turn to this scripture and what does it say? And then this one, and then this one, and lets you read and get in that for yourself. And then his new show that we talked about last time, The Life and Teachings of Jesus, that just looks at, okay, well, what does the Bible say about Jesus? Not what do some men say. And it's a very different approach to other people. So that's really what we want you to do with this magazine. But thank you so much for joining us, Philip, and helping us dig into what this magazine is encouraging and promoting. We're so glad we could have you with us today.
Great to be here. Looking forward to the next time.
Which I think will be a little bit longer, I guess, of a gap, as it's our combined April-May issue, I think, coming up next. But we'll be back, of course, on this show much more quickly with our regular Friday show. I'll also slip in a quick shout out to our producer, George Haddad. If you do have any questions or comments, you can get in touch with us, trumpetworld@thetrumpet.com. We'd be really happy to hear from you, and we will be back Friday. Until then, keep watching your world.